I am Melanie Williams, 32 years old, and the perpetually overlooked middle child of the Williams banking dynasty. After 10 years building my secret empire abroad, I finally returned to my hometown last week. My sister Stephanie runs our family bank branch now, and she had no idea what was coming. Walking through those marble doors again made my stomach twist with anxiety, but what happened next changed our family forever. If you are watching this from a place where family has ever underestimated you, hit that subscribe button as I show you how I finally earned my respect. Growing up as a Williams meant one thing was certain. Banking was in our blood. My grandfather founded Williams National Bank in the 70s with a single branch and a vision. By the time I was born, we had locations in 3 states and a reputation for old money excellence. My father expanded further, taking the bank regional and cementing our family name as financial royalty in our community. From my earliest memories, there was an unspoken expectation that all Williams children would join the family business. We lived in a sprawling colonial home on Maple Avenue, the kind with columns and a circular driveway that screamed old money and responsibility. Family dinners were basically board meetings where we discussed market trends instead of school activities. Stephanie, my older sister by 4 years, embodied everything my parents wanted in an heir. Top of her class, student body president, and an almost scary passion for financial regulations. She could calculate compound interest in her head by age 12. My parents beamed with pride when she graduated with honors in finance and immediately started her ascent through our family bank. Thomas, my younger brother by 4 years, was the golden boy who could do no wrong. Athletic, charming, and smart enough to get by without much effort. He worked at corporate headquarters in a position my father created specifically for him, something with a fancy title that basically meant he looked good in meetings with investors. And then there was me, the creative middle child, the square peg they kept trying to hammer into their round banking hole. While Stephanie was memorizing banking regulations, I was designing websites for local businesses. When Thomas was playing golf with future connections, I was coding in my room or sketching app interfaces. My relationship with Stephanie was particularly strained. As children, she made sure I understood the hierarchy. She had our parents wrapped around her finger, while I was the disappointment who just could not seem to focus on proper Williams priorities. During family finance quizzes at dinner, she would answer every question perfectly, then smirk when I struggled. She had nicknames for me. Melanie the Mistaken, the Creativity Crisis, the Family Flaw. My parents laughed them off as sibling rivalry, but each one cut deeper than they knew. The breaking point came during a family dinner 10 years ago, the night after my college graduation. While everyone congratulated Stephanie on her recent promotion to loan officer, I tentatively mentioned my plans to move to California and join a tech startup. The table went silent before Stephanie laughed. Not just a chuckle, but a full theatrical laugh that everyone else eventually joined. My father cleared his throat. "Your degree is in business, Melanie. Surely you can find something more stable." But Stephanie was not finished. Why waste time with those tech nerds? She waved her hand dismissively. Those little companies fail every day. Besides, what would you even do there? We all know computers are not really your thing. The truth was I had been coding since I was 14, but no one in my family had ever bothered to notice my skills or interests. They were too busy watching Stephanie shine. That night, I packed my bags and booked a one-way ticket to San Francisco. No one tried particularly hard to stop me. My mother said I would come crawling back when reality hit. My father said the bank would always have an entry-level position waiting when I was ready to be serious about my future. What none of them knew was that I had already secured a junior developer position at a promising startup. Within 3 years, I had developed a revolutionary financial security algorithm that caught the attention of major investors. 2 years after that, I launched my own fintech company, SecurePath Solutions. Over the next 5 years, my company expanded globally. We revolutionized banking security protocols and digital payment systems. Major financial institutions paid millions to implement our software. I was invited to speak at international conferences and featured in technology magazines. My net worth climbed into the billions. And through it all, my family remained oblivious. They never searched for news about me, never checked on my well-being. Our communications dwindled to obligatory holiday texts and brief birthday calls where they did most of the talking. I never volunteered information about my success, and they never asked. It became a strange experiment. How long could I be a billionaire without my banking family noticing? Then last month, my grandmother passed away. Despite her being part of the family banking obsession, she was the only one who had ever supported my creative interests. Her funeral was the one family event I could not miss. After 10 years away, it was time to go home. I decided to visit the family bank branch before the funeral to withdraw some cash for incidentals. I had maintained my old checking account all these years, occasionally transferring in small amounts to keep it active. What I had not anticipated was that my sister would now be running that very branch. The Williams National Bank building stood exactly as I remembered it. 3 stories of imposing limestone, with my grandfather's name etched above massive oak doors. Stepping into the marble-floored lobby felt like traveling back in time. The same crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings, and the same larger-than-life portraits of Williams patriarchs lined the walls, including my grandfather looking sternly down at all who entered his domain. What had changed were the people. As I approached the teller counter, I recognized Amanda Lewis, a girl who had been 2 years behind me in high school. She did a double take when she saw me. "Melanie Williams. Is that really you?" she exclaimed a bit too loudly. "Everyone said you moved to California and disappeared." I offered a polite smile, uncomfortable with the attention as several employees turned to look. "Yes, just back for Grandma Williams' funeral," I said quietly. "I just need to make a small withdrawal from my old account." Amanda nodded with exaggerated sympathy. "Of course, so sorry about your grandmother. Let me just pull up your account." She frowned at her computer screen. "It is showing your account as dormant. Let me get the manager to help you." Before I could protest, Amanda had pressed a button at her station. I knew what was coming even before I heard the sharp click of designer heels on marble. Stephanie appeared from a glass office in the back, immaculate in a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, not a strand out of place. She had always been pretty in a classical way, but now her features seemed hardened by ambition and the constant pursuit of perfection. Her step faltered briefly when she saw me, surprise flickering across her face before her professional mask slid back into place. She approached with the confident stride of someone on her home turf. "Well, well. The prodigal sister returns," she said, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. Her voice carried that same condescending tone I remembered from childhood, now refined with a decade of corporate authority. I kept my expression neutral. "Hello, Stephanie. I just need to make a small withdrawal." She glanced at the computer screen over Amanda's shoulder, then raised an eyebrow. "This account has been inactive for nearly 3 years." She turned to face me fully, arms crossed. "How much are you looking to withdraw?" "Just $200, I replied. Something gleeful flashed in her eyes, and I knew immediately I had given her exactly what she wanted. An opportunity to establish dominance. $200. She repeated, voice projecting even more. She let out a small, theatrical laugh. "That is all. The Williams banking prodigy cannot even manage $200 on her own." The bank had grown quiet. Every employee and customer was watching our exchange. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, not from embarrassment but from simmering anger at her deliberate humiliation. Stephanie leaned closer, her voice lowered but still audible to those nearby. "Look at you, Melanie. 10 years away, and what do you have to show for it? That bag is a knockoff, your shoes are scuffed, and you clearly cannot afford a decent haircut." She clicked her tongue. "And now you come crawling back for pocket change." I remained silent, which only encouraged her further. "Let me guess," she continued, walking around the counter to stand directly in front of me. The California dream did not quite work out. Those little tech companies crashed and burned just like I said they would. She brushed an imaginary piece of lint from her perfect suit. You should have listened to me. The bank could have given you a real career, but you were too stubborn. Amanda and the other tellers looked mortified on my behalf, but no one dared contradict the branch manager. A few customers shifted uncomfortably, pretending not to listen. I simply need to withdraw $200 from my account, I repeated calmly. Stephanie's smile turned sharp. This is not a charity for family failures, she announced. If you want to access a dormant account, there is paperwork. Procedures. Rules that even a Williams must follow. She gestured to a seating area. You can wait over there while Amanda prepares the forms. It might take a while. Something inside me snapped. Not in a dramatic, shouting way, but in the quiet realization that this pattern would continue forever unless I changed it. For 10 years, I had built my empire in silence, partly to prove something to myself, but also awaiting this very moment. I reached into my designer handbag, the one Stephanie had just called a knockoff despite it being worth more than her monthly salary, and pulled out a leather portfolio. Actually, Stephanie, I said quietly, I would like to speak with Regional Director Franklin. Is he still overseeing this region? Her smug expression faltered slightly. Why would you need to speak with Director Franklin? It concerns some recent acquisitions, I said, keeping my voice even. Would you mind calling him down? I believe his office is still on the 3rd floor. Confusion replaced her condescension. What acquisitions? What are you talking about? I held up the portfolio. These documents will explain everything. Director Franklin will understand immediately. Something in my tone must have concerned her, because she hesitated before picking up a phone at Amanda's station. She kept her eyes on me as she requested Franklin's presence, her confidence visibly wavering. Within minutes, a tall man with silver hair and an expensive suit hurried into the lobby. Director Franklin had aged since I last saw him, but he still carried himself with the authority of someone who managed millions of dollars daily. Ms. Williams requested to see you, sir, Stephanie said, attempting to maintain her professional composure. Franklin looked at me with a puzzled expression until recognition dawned in his eyes. His mouth actually fell open. Melanie Williams. The Melanie Williams from SecurePath Solutions. The same, I confirmed with a small smile. Franklin extended his hand eagerly. This is an honor, truly. Your keynote at the International Finance Security Conference last year was revolutionary. We have been implementing your protocols across our entire system. Stephanie's face had begun to drain of color. Her eyes darted between Franklin and me, struggling to process this unexpected development. I handed Franklin my portfolio. As you may know, Director, I have recently acquired majority shares in Global Finance Partners. He nodded. Yes, it was in all the financial papers. A brilliant $5 billion acquisition. Stephanie made a small choking sound. What you may not know, I continued, is that Global Finance Partners is the parent company that acquired controlling interest in Williams National Bank 3 years ago. The entire bank fell silent. Not the awkward silence from before, but the complete absence of sound that happens when 24 people collectively forget to breathe. Franklin rapidly flipped through my documentation, his expression growing increasingly alarmed. These seem to be in order, he finally said, his voice strained. You are now effectively the majority owner of Williams National Bank, I finished for him. Including this branch. Stephanie's face had turned completely white. She gripped the counter for support. I would like to test the liquidity and transfer capabilities of this branch, I said professionally. My team is evaluating all branches for efficiency and modern banking protocols. Franklin nodded vigorously. Of course, absolutely. What sort of transaction would you like to process today? I will need to initiate a series of transfers totaling $5 billion from my corporate accounts, I stated. I understand that will trigger security protocols and may require additional authorization, but I want to observe how this branch handles such requests. A soft thud drew everyone's attention. Stephanie had literally dropped to her knees behind the counter, one hand still clutching the marble edge. Her eyes were wide with shock, her breathing shallow and rapid. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation in private," Franklin suggested urgently, glancing at the stunned customers and staff. "That would be appropriate," I agreed, as Amanda rushed to help my sister to her feet. As Franklin led us toward the management offices, the bank's computer systems began flashing security alerts. The transaction request had triggered automatic freezes across the network, exactly as I had anticipated. Stephanie stumbled alongside us, supported by Amanda, her perfect composure completely shattered. Director Franklin guided us into Stephanie's office, a corner space with windows overlooking the town square. Banking awards and family photographs covered one wall, a carefully curated display of William's success. He pulled the blinds closed as Amanda helped Stephanie into her leather executive chair. "Can I get anyone water?" Amanda asked, clearly desperate for an excuse to leave the room. "That would be great, thank you," I replied, taking a seat across from my sister. Franklin remained standing, nervously flipping through my documents. As the door closed behind Amanda, Stephanie seemed to find her voice. "This is impossible," she whispered, shaking her head. "This has to be some kind of joke." "I assure you it is not," Franklin interjected, holding up the acquisition papers. "These are legitimate. Your sister has effectively become our boss." Stephanie's shock was beginning to transform into something else. Anger, disbelief, and wounded pride battled across her features. "You," she spat. "You own the bank. The creative disaster. The family embarrassment." I kept my voice level. "Precisely." "How? When?" she demanded, color returning to her face. "And why did none of us know about this?" I leaned back in my chair. "Remember that little tech company you laughed at? It became SecurePath Solutions. We revolutionized digital banking security. Every major financial institution in the world uses our protocols now, including this bank." Franklin nodded enthusiastically. "SecurePath is the gold standard in the industry. We implemented their systems 2 years ago." Stephanie pressed her fingers to her temples. "And no one made the connection. No one realized it was you." "Why would they?" I asked. "When I left, I was just the disappointing middle child with unrealistic dreams. No one from this family ever checked on me, asked what I was doing, or showed any interest in my career. I built a $10 billion company, and none of you even bothered to Google me in 10 years. The door opened as Amanda returned with water bottles. She distributed them quickly and retreated, clearly sensing the tension. Stephanie took a long drink, her hand trembling slightly. "So this is your revenge? You secretly buy our bank and then what? Fire me? Humiliate me like I just did to you?" Franklin cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I should notify headquarters about this development." He moved toward the door. "Please do," I confirmed. "And have them send the branch audit team as well. I would like a complete review of this location's operations." He nodded and exited swiftly, leaving me alone with my sister. As the door closed, Stephanie's demeanor abruptly shifted. Her back straightened, and a professional smile appeared on her face. "Melanie, this is absolutely amazing," she gushed, voice dripping with sudden admiration. "I had no idea you had become so successful. I am so proud of you." The insincerity was almost laughable. "Really?" I asked. "Because 5 minutes ago, I was a family failure who could not manage $200. She waved her hand dismissively. "That was just silly sibling teasing. I never meant any of it. You know how we have always joked around." I leaned forward. "Let me be clear, Stephanie. I did not come here planning this confrontation. I genuinely just wanted to withdraw some cash before Grandma's funeral. You chose to humiliate me in front of your entire staff and customers. That was your decision." Her false smile faltered. "Well, I may have been a bit harsh, but—" "You have been harsh my entire life," I interrupted. "You called me the family flaw. You told everyone my dreams were worthless. You made me feel like nothing, and our parents let you do it because you were the banking prodigy they always wanted." Stephanie swallowed hard. That was years ago. We were just kids. I was not a kid when I left 10 years ago, I countered. I was a college graduate with a business degree and coding skills that would eventually be worth billions. But none of you could see past your banking bubble to recognize my potential. She leaned forward eagerly. But I recognize it now. In fact, I have always thought you were brilliant, just in a different way than the rest of us. We could work together now, combine our strengths. The Williams sisters, taking the banking world by storm. I almost admired her ability to pivot so quickly. But this conversation was interrupted by Franklin's return, accompanied by two serious-looking individuals carrying tablets. "Ms. Williams," he said nervously. "These are our regional auditors, Sandra Chen and Robert Patel. They would like to review the branch records immediately, with your permission." I stood and shook their hands. "Please proceed. I would like a complete audit of all practices under my sister's management." Stephanie's face fell as she realized the conversation was not going as she had hoped. "You cannot just come in here and audit me," she protested. "I run this branch perfectly. We have exceeded targets every quarter." Sandra glanced up from her tablet. "Actually, according to these preliminary reports, there appear to be some irregularities in the loan approval process. Several high-value loans were approved despite failing to meet standard criteria." Stephanie's face flushed. Those were executive decisions based on client relationships. Robert frowned at his screen. "And these fee waivers for certain accounts do not seem to follow company policy. They appear to be primarily for your personal acquaintances." I watched as my sister's carefully constructed professional image began to crumble in real time. Franklin looked increasingly uncomfortable. "I think we have seen enough for today," I said finally. I stood and gathered my portfolio. "The auditors will continue their work, and we will discuss the findings after Grandma's funeral. Family should come first, after all. Isn't that what you always said, Stephanie?" She stared at me, speechless for perhaps the first time in her life. As I turned to leave, I could not resist one parting comment. "You never believed I was worth anything. Today proved which one of us was right." The look of devastation on her face brought me less satisfaction than I had imagined it would. As news of my unexpected return and shocking revelations spread, my phone began buzzing with messages from family members who had barely communicated with me in years. I ignored most of them as I checked into my hotel. I needed time to process the confrontation with Stephanie and prepare for the inevitable family fallout. I had just settled into my room when my phone rang with my mother's name on the screen. Taking a deep breath, I answered. "Melanie." Her voice sounded strained. "Is it true what we are hearing about you and the bank?" "Hello to you too, Mom. It has been 3 months since we last spoke." She ignored my pointed comment. "Stephanie just called us in hysterics. Something about you owning the bank and ordering an audit of her branch. What is going on?" I gave her the condensed version of both my business success and the scene at the bank, carefully omitting the satisfaction I had felt watching Stephanie's perfect facade crumble. "Why did you never tell us?" she demanded when I finished. "We are your family." The irony of her indignation was almost too much. "Did any of you ever ask?" I countered. "Did anyone in this family ever show genuine interest in what I was building?" Her silence was answer enough. "There is an emergency family dinner tonight at the house," she finally said. "Everyone will be there. We need to discuss this before the funeral tomorrow." I agreed to attend, though the prospect of facing the entire Williams clan made my stomach churn. As I hung up, I wondered if my grandmother would have approved of what had transpired. Despite being part of the banking dynasty, she had been the only one who encouraged my creative interests, slipping me articles about technology and innovation when no one was looking. That evening, I pulled into the familiar circular driveway of my childhood home. Several luxury cars were already parked outside, including my father's signature black Mercedes and my brother Thomas's sports car. Noticeably absent was Stephanie's white BMW. My mother opened the door before I could knock. Her critical eye took in my appearance. Designer dress, perfect blowout, subtle but expensive jewelry. I could see her reassessing me with this new information about my wealth. The family was gathered in the formal dining room, the one reserved for important occasions and business discussions. My father sat at the head of the table, looking older than I remembered but still commanding respect in his tailored suit. Thomas sat to his right, handsome as ever but with a nervousness I had never seen in him before. Extended family filled the remaining seats. Uncles, aunts, and cousins who had participated in the family business to varying degrees. Conversations stopped as I entered. Every eye turned to me, expressions ranging from shock to curiosity to barely concealed opportunism. "Melanie," my father said, rising from his seat. His tone held an unfamiliar note of deference. "Please join us." I took the empty chair at the opposite end of the table, a position traditionally reserved for the second most important person in the room. The symbolism was not lost on anyone present. So he began after I was seated. "It seems congratulations are in order. You have achieved remarkable success." "Thank you," I replied simply. An uncomfortable silence followed, broken by my cousin David. "Is it true you are worth more than $10 billion now?" Several family members shot him disapproving looks for his directness, but all leaned forward slightly, eager for my answer. SecurePath Solutions is valued at approximately $12 billion, I confirmed. "I maintain majority ownership." A collective murmur ran through the room. My Uncle Philip cleared his throat. "And you truly acquired controlling interest in Williams National Bank?" "Through my acquisition of Global Finance Partners, yes." My father leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Why did you not inform us of these developments, Melanie? We could have celebrated your success, supported your endeavors, the way you supported me when I left." I asked quietly. "The way you predicted I would fail and come crawling back." His face flushed. "That was a different time. We were concerned about your welfare." I chose not to argue the point. "Where is Stephanie?" I asked instead. Glances were exchanged around the table. My mother sighed. "She is too upset to join us tonight. The situation at the bank today was quite distressing for her." "You mean being caught bending rules and facing consequences for the first time in her life?" I thought but did not say. Thomas surprised me by speaking up. "I think what Stephanie did today was wrong," he said, looking directly at me. "The way she treated you was inexcusable." Every head turned to him in shock. Thomas had always aligned himself with Stephanie in family matters. "She has always been like that," he continued, belittling others to make herself look better. "I have been on the receiving end too, just not as much as you were, Mel." My mother made a disapproving sound. "This is not the time to air grievances, Thomas. We need to focus on the bank situation." "Actually, I think this is exactly the time," I countered. For years, this family has operated on a clear hierarchy, with Stephanie at the top and me at the bottom. Today, that hierarchy was upended, and everyone is uncomfortable because the natural order has been disturbed. The truth of my words hung heavy in the air. Then, as if on cue, the doorbell rang. My mother excused herself to answer it. She returned moments later, followed by a stream of extended family members I barely recognized. Second cousins, great aunts and uncles, distant relatives who had never bothered to keep in touch. All suddenly appeared with warm hugs and declarations of how they had always believed in me. "We heard the wonderful news," gushed a great aunt I had met perhaps 3 times in my life. "We always knew you were destined for greatness. I have a fantastic investment opportunity I would love to discuss with you," said a cousin whose name I could not recall. My father quickly took control, directing the latecomers to the living room with promises that I would speak with them later. When we were again alone with just the immediate family, he turned to me with a businessman's calculating expression. "Melanie," he said carefully, "what exactly are your intentions regarding the bank?" Before I could answer, I heard my mother's voice from the hallway, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. I excused myself and followed the sound to find her on the phone, her back to me. "I know, sweetheart," I know she was saying. "But you need to pull yourself together. Yes, it is a shock to all of us, but we need to present a united front as a family. No, I understand you feel betrayed, but..." I cleared my throat, and she whirled around, her eyes widening when she saw me. Her hand covered the phone. "Stephanie is having a difficult time," she explained unnecessarily. I could hear my sister's voice through the phone, high-pitched and frantic. "Is she there? Is Melanie there now?" My mother hesitated, then handed me the phone with reluctance. Stephanie's voice came through immediately, a mixture of anger and desperation. "How could you do this to me?" she demanded. "You deliberately humiliated me, ordered an audit on my branch, and now my entire career is at risk." "I did not plan any of this," I replied calmly. "I came to withdraw $200, and you chose to mock me publicly. Everything that followed was a consequence of your actions, not mine." She made a sound of frustration. "So you are just going to destroy everything I have worked for? Is that your revenge?" "The audit will proceed based on its findings, not on my personal feelings," I told her. "If you have been running the branch properly, you have nothing to worry about." As I hung up, I noticed an envelope on the hallway table, addressed to me in my grandmother's distinctive handwriting. When I asked my mother about it, she explained that Grandma had left letters for each of us to be delivered after her death. I took the envelope to a quiet corner of the house and opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a brief note. "My dearest Melanie, if you are reading this, I have passed on, but not before seeing your remarkable success from afar. Yes, I have known about SecurePath all along. I have followed your career with immense pride, though I respected your wish to keep it private from the family. Your grandfather and I built this bank on principles of integrity and service, values that I fear have been forgotten by some in our family. I have arranged certain things to test the character of my descendants. Your presence at my funeral is part of that test. Remember that true wealth lies not in accounts and acquisitions, but in how we treat others, especially those we have power over. Use your new position wisely, dear one. With love and faith in you. Grandma Williams." I sat there, letter in hand, as realization dawned. My grandmother had known everything and had somehow engineered this confrontation from beyond the grave. The acquisition opportunity that had allowed me to gain control of the family bank had seemed too perfect at the time. Now I understood why. As I rejoined the family dinner, watching them scramble to adjust to the new reality, I realized that this revenge I had accidentally enacted brought me less satisfaction than I had imagined. Power over those who had hurt me felt hollow, compared to the wisdom in my grandmother's final words. The next morning, the day of my grandmother's funeral, I awoke to dozens of missed calls and messages. News of my ownership of Williams National Bank had spread throughout our small community, creating a firestorm of gossip and speculation. Several business publications had already picked up the story. Tech billionaire secretly acquires family banking empire. I dressed carefully in a conservative black dress, preparing myself for the emotional day ahead. The Williams family had a dedicated section at the town's historic cemetery, where generations of bankers lay beneath granite monuments to their financial achievements. My grandmother would be laid to rest beside my grandfather, their legacy now complicated by the revelations of the past 24 hours. At the funeral home, family members clustered in small groups, conversations stopping abruptly as I entered. My parents stood greeting mourners, my father's arm protectively around my mother's shoulders. Thomas approached me immediately, a coffee in each hand. "Thought you might need this," he said, offering me a cup. "It is going to be a long day." I accepted gratefully, surprised by his thoughtfulness. "Thanks, Thomas. How are things at headquarters?" He grimaced. "Chaotic. News of your acquisition has everyone panicking about restructuring and layoffs." He hesitated. "Is that your plan?" I shook my head. "I have no intention of dismantling what Grandma and Grandpa built. I just want ethical management and fair practices." His relief was visible. "Good. Because despite everything, this bank means something to a lot of people, including me. We were interrupted by my father, who approached with a serious expression. Stephanie has arrived, he said quietly. She is in the side room. I think it would be best if you two spoke privately before the service. I nodded and made my way to the indicated room. Stephanie sat alone, staring at a framed photograph of our grandmother. She looked terrible, her usually perfect appearance disheveled, eyes red from crying. She did not look up as I entered. The auditors found 12 instances of policy violations, she said flatly. Loans to friends that should have been rejected. Fee waivers for golf buddies. Nothing illegal, but enough to justify termination. I sat across from her. Is that what you are afraid of? Being fired? She finally looked at me, her expression raw with emotion. This bank is my entire life, Melanie. It is all I have ever wanted, all I have ever worked for. Without it, I do not know who I am. The vulnerability in her admission caught me off guard. For as long as I could remember, Stephanie had been the confident one, the perfectionist with unwavering self-assurance. Seeing her broken like this gave me no pleasure. Before I could respond, the funeral director appeared to inform us it was time for the service. We joined the procession to the cemetery, where dozens of community members had gathered to pay respects to my grandmother. As principal shareholders of the town's largest employer, the Williams family commanded a certain reverence, now heightened by curiosity about the dramatic power shift. The service was dignified and brief, just as my grandmother would have wanted. As the final prayers were spoken and mourners began to disperse, Stephanie remained at the graveside, staring down at the polished casket. I stayed as well, the two of us standing in silence until everyone else had moved to their cars. Did you know that Grandma left me a letter? Stephanie finally asked, her voice barely audible. She left one for me too, I replied. Stephanie pulled a crumpled envelope from her purse. In mine, she told me she has been disappointed in how I have led the branch. She said I focused too much on power and prestige, and not enough on the principles she and Grandpa founded the bank on. She reached up to wipe away a tear. She knew I was bending rules and looking the other way for certain clients. I was not surprised that our grandmother had been aware of Stephanie's management practices. She had always been more perceptive than anyone gave her credit for. In my letter, she said she arranged for me to acquire the bank as a test, I admitted. I think she wanted to see what I would do with that power. Stephanie looked at me sharply. And what will you do? Will you fire me? Take everything away? The raw fear in her voice made me pause. For years, I had imagined confronting Stephanie, making her feel as small as she had made me feel. Now that I had that power, I realized it was not what I wanted. Do you know why I left 10 years ago? I asked her. She shook her head. It was after that dinner, when you laughed at my tech aspirations. You convinced everyone that I was making a foolish mistake, that I would fail spectacularly. Every time I achieved something in Silicon Valley, I thought about proving you wrong. In a way, you motivated my success. Stephanie stared down at our grandmother's grave. I was jealous of you, she confessed quietly. You had the courage to leave, to chart your own path. I was too afraid to be anything but what was expected of me. Her admission stunned me. The golden child, jealous of the disappointment. Everyone knew I would run the bank someday, she continued. There was never a choice for me, never another option considered. The pressure to be perfect, to never make mistakes. Her voice cracked. I became exactly what they wanted and lost myself in the process. For the first time, I saw my sister not as the confident tormentor of my childhood, but as another victim of our family's rigid expectations, trapped in a role that had consumed her identity. As we stood together at our grandmother's grave, I made a decision that would have surprised my younger self. The satisfaction of revenge was fleeting, but the opportunity to heal old wounds might lead to something more meaningful. Have you ever considered that maybe Grandma brought us together for a reason? I suggested, not just to confront our past, but to fix the future of the bank she loved. Stephanie looked at me with cautious hope. What are you saying? I am saying that firing you would be easy, but working together to reform the bank might be more in line with what Grandma wanted. As we walked back toward the funeral cars, I outlined a conditional second chance. Stephanie could remain as branch manager, but with oversight and a commitment to change her management approach. The family bank would benefit from both her traditional banking knowledge and my technological innovation. For the first time since childhood, we began a genuine conversation as sisters rather than rivals. The weeks following my grandmother's funeral were filled with difficult conversations and tentative progress. I extended my stay in town, working remotely while overseeing the beginning of reforms at Williams National Bank. The initial audit had uncovered various issues beyond Stephanie's branch, revealing a banking culture that had drifted from my grandparents' founding principles. I arranged a meeting with the bank's executive team, including Stephanie and Thomas, in the headquarters conference room. The tension was palpable as I outlined my vision for the bank's future. Transparent practices, improved technology, and a return to community-focused values. Stephanie sat silently throughout most of the presentation, her expression unreadable. When I finished, all eyes turned to her, awaiting the reaction of the woman who had been the de facto heir apparent for years. "This technology implementation timeline is ambitious," she finally said, tapping the proposal. "But I think my branch can serve as the pilot location. We have the customer base and staff to test these new systems properly." Her willingness to cooperate, rather than obstruct, surprised everyone in the room. After the meeting, she asked if we could speak privately in her office. I expected resistance, she admitted once we were alone. "In your position, I would have fired me immediately." That would have been the easy solution, I acknowledged. But not necessarily the right one for the bank or our family. She gestured to her office, with its view of the town square. "I have spent 14 years working toward the corner office at headquarters. That was always the goal, to eventually take Father's place. When you appeared with ownership rights, I thought everything I had worked for was gone." I leaned against her desk. "The difference is, I never wanted his job. I built something completely different. Would you consider a partnership of sorts?" She asked hesitantly. "Your technology expertise with my banking experience." The suggestion was unexpected but intriguing. "Are you proposing a truce, Stephanie?" She nodded. "More than that. A fresh start." She extended her hand. "For Grandma's sake, if nothing else." I accepted her handshake, cautiously optimistic, but still wary of this new, humble version of my sister. Over the following days, we began the painful process of addressing decades of resentment and misunderstanding. During a dinner at my hotel restaurant, Stephanie revealed the pressure she had faced as the oldest child. "From the time I was 10, Dad was grooming me to run the bank," she explained. "Every mistake was treated as a potential disaster for the Williams legacy. I was terrified of failure, so I became perfect at their version of success." She stirred her drink absently. "When you showed interest in technology instead of banking protocols, I was envious of your freedom. But you made my life miserable," I reminded her. "The nicknames, the public humiliation, the constant undermining." She had the grace to look ashamed. "I thought if I could prove you were wrong, somehow it would validate that I was right to follow the path laid out for me." She sighed. "I was insecure, and I took it out on you. I am truly sorry, Melanie." Her apology seemed genuine, though years of distrust made me cautious. Words needed to be backed by actions. Those actions began the following week, when Stephanie implemented the first of many changes at her branch. She publicly acknowledged policy violations and introduced new oversight measures. She apologized to staff members she had previously treated poorly and began mentoring younger employees rather than intimidating them. My brother Thomas proved to be an unexpected ally in the bank's transformation. His position at headquarters gave him insight into operations across all branches, and he eagerly embraced the opportunity to contribute meaningfully rather than coasting on the family name. My parents struggled more with the new dynamic. My father oscillated between pride in my accomplishments and discomfort at the shift in family hierarchy. My mother worked to repair relationships damaged by years of favoritism, though old habits proved difficult to break. The most significant breakthrough came 3 months after the funeral, during the bank's annual staff appreciation event. Traditionally, this had been Stephanie's showcase, where she took credit for branch achievements. This year, she surprised everyone by highlighting individual contributions and publicly acknowledging her past leadership failures. At the end of her speech, she called me to the stage. The Williams National Bank has been given an extraordinary opportunity for growth through my sister's technology expertise, she announced to the assembled employees. I have asked Melanie to create a new innovation department within our bank, combining our traditional strengths with cutting-edge financial technology. The crowd applauded as Stephanie handed me the microphone. I looked out at the faces of people who had witnessed my humiliation months earlier and now regarded me with respect bordering on awe. Banking and technology are not opposing forces, I told them. They are natural partners in creating financial security for our community. I am honored to help shape the future of my grandparents' legacy. As Stephanie and I stood side by side on that stage, I realized we had begun a journey neither of us could have imagined. The wounds of the past had not fully healed, but we had found a path forward that honored our grandmother's final wishes. The bank that had once divided us might ultimately be the thing that brought us together. 6 months after that fateful day, when I walked into the bank for a $200 withdrawal, Williams National Bank had undergone a remarkable transformation. My technology innovation department had introduced digital solutions that streamlined operations while maintaining the personal touch that had been my grandparents' trademark. Stephanie's branch had become a model for transparent practices and community engagement, with customer satisfaction scores higher than they had been in decades. More surprising than the professional changes were the personal ones. My relationship with Stephanie, while still occasionally strained by old memories, had evolved into a genuine partnership based on mutual respect. We had discovered that our different perspectives and skills complemented each other in ways neither of us had anticipated. On a crisp autumn morning, Stephanie and I visited our grandmother's grave together, placing fresh flowers against the polished granite. "Do you think she knew this would happen?" Stephanie asked, adjusting the arrangement. "That we would end up working together." I smiled, thinking of my grandmother's letter. "I think she hoped for it." She was playing the long game, setting up pieces years in advance. Stephanie nodded thoughtfully. She always could see things the rest of us missed. She glanced at me. "I never told you, but after you left 10 years ago, she would ask about you every time I saw her. When I had nothing to report because none of us stayed in touch, she would get this disappointed look." I was sending her updates, I admitted. Not about my business success, but personal things. Photos of places I visited, stories about people I met. I think she was the only one who really saw me as more than just the family misfit. Stephanie was quiet for a moment. "I am sorry we missed so much of your life," she finally said. "I am sorry I was the reason you felt you had to leave." The sincere regret in her voice touched me deeply. Coming back was never about revenge, I told her. At least not entirely. It was about finally being seen by the people who had looked past me for so long. As we walked back to the car, Stephanie described the changes in her own life. She had started seeing a therapist to work through her perfectionism and need for control. She had reconnected with old friends she had discarded during her climb to the top. Most significantly, she had begun mentoring young women interested in finance, encouraging creativity alongside traditional skills. "The bank has transformed under your influence," she acknowledged. "But so have I. I spent my whole life chasing a narrow definition of success, and it made me someone I do not like very much. Watching you build something on your own terms has made me rethink everything." Back at headquarters, we joined my parents and Thomas for our now regular family dinner, a tradition we had established to maintain our newfound connections. The dynamics had shifted dramatically since that first tense meal after my return. My father, initially resistant to change, had gradually come to appreciate the innovation I brought to the family business. My mother worked consciously to treat each of us with equal interest and affection. the most profound change was perhaps in Stephanie herself. Where once she had dominated conversations with achievements and criticisms, she now listened more than she spoke. The sharp edges of her personality had softened, though the core strength remained. After dinner, I excused myself to finalize plans for my newest project. The Williams Innovation Scholarship, designed to support students pursuing unconventional paths in finance and technology. The first recipient would be announced the following week, a young woman whose creative approach to community banking had impressed both Stephanie and me. As I worked in my office, Stephanie appeared in the doorway. "Remember how I used to call you the family flaw?" she asked. I nodded, the old nickname still carrying a sting despite everything. She sat across from me. "I was so wrong. You were never the flaw in our family. You were the one who could see that we were flawed. All of us stuck in patterns that limited who we could become." Her insight surprised me. "That is a remarkably self-aware observation," I told her. She smiled ruefully. "Therapy is expensive but effective." She leaned forward. "Thank you for not destroying me when you had the chance. I would have in your position. The truth is, I considered it," I admitted. "When I saw you on your knees that day, part of me felt vindicated. But Grandma was right. True power is not in making others kneel before you, but in having the strength to help them stand." As Thanksgiving approached, we prepared for the first holiday with our extended family since the ownership revelation. The dynamic would be different now, with relationships redefined and old hierarchies dismantled. The bank that had been the center of our family identity for generations remained important, but no longer consumed us. The family gathered around my parents' dining table, the conversation flowing naturally between banking matters and personal stories. I watched Stephanie interact with our younger cousins, encouraging their diverse interests rather than pushing them toward traditional paths. Thomas discussed a community outreach program he had developed, passion evident in his voice. When everyone had been served, my father stood to offer the traditional Williams Thanksgiving toast. For generations, this had been a recitation of the bank's achievements and future goals. This year, he surprised us all. "This year, I am thankful for second chances," he began, his voice thick with emotion. "For the opportunity to see my children not as extensions of a legacy, but as remarkable individuals with their own unique gifts." He raised his glass toward me. "Melanie, you taught us that success comes in many forms, and that it is never too late to rebuild what has been broken." As glasses clinked around the table, I caught Stephanie's eye. The sister who had once been my tormentor now looked at me with genuine respect and affection. We had both been shaped by the expectations placed upon us, one bending to them until she nearly broke, the other fleeing to forge her own path. In the end, we had found our way back to each other, stronger for the journey. That evening, alone in my childhood bedroom, I reflected on the lessons of the past 6 months. The revenge I had briefly savored had ultimately led to something far more valuable: healing for my family and myself. By choosing reconciliation over retribution, I had honored my grandmother's final wish while breaking the cycle of hurt that had defined us for too long. Sometimes the family that breaks your heart is the same one that teaches you how to make it whole again. My journey from the overlooked middle child to the powerful businesswoman who could have destroyed her sister had taught me that true strength lies not in the ability to make others tremble, but in the courage to offer compassion when they do. What about you? Has a family member ever underestimated your potential or made you feel small? How did you respond, and did it ultimately lead to healing or more pain? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey of reconciliation touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of transformation. And remember, sometimes the greatest power comes not from making others kneel, but from helping them rise. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the strength to heal your own family wounds.